nationality apprentissage from Colombia.
Don't worry, we're going to put it in English.
Okay.
Can I use?
Point. How do you want to find it?
Thanks a lot.
Good evening. Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure for us to be here with all you. My name is Carlos David Martinez. My partner in this research is Carlos Alberto Barón Serrano, who is here with us. And we come from, in Spanish is Servicio Nacional de Aprendizaje SENA from Colombia. And in English, you can say National Service of Training. You know, the literary translation is National Service of Learning. But in the context of Europe and Asia and North America, it's better to talk about learning for this case. Later we're going to talk about it. Servicio Nacional de Aprendizaje SENA is an vocational and educational training and also an superior education institution in Colombia. It's a public educational institution. So our research is about critical variables for the development of policies for the post-secondary and higher education in Colombia and Latin America. I want to ask you excuses for my boss. I'm a little bad after 20 hours in an airplane and all that. Well, there are many, excuse me one second. Well, to address issues to the educational policy of a nation, it's necessary to review the purposes for education, the goals, agents, and stakeholders, economic projections, and political projects that are endorsed by the action of conventional or innovative educational process. Throughout the history of humankind, institutional education has been used for different political purposes. To promote intellectual emancipation, if you want, but also to direct feeling, thinking of the people for or against a ruler or a dictator. Also to promote ideas or ideologies to facilitate the access and maintain the power of elite groups, to develop warfare, and even to overthrow rules or dictators. You can find many examples about this in the history of education and humankind. Just for put some examples, in the United States, Democrats were leaders, the Democrat Party were leaders to promote economic development through mass education promoting the generation of skilled labor. In the Colombian case, conservatives have been called to unite the development of educational policies. And we have in the history of Colombia many examples of it. In Colombia, the most relevant problem in public educational policy has to do with the lack of stability in public policies. No long-term economic by analysis or diagnosis of occupational and educational projections. If you want to compare, this was an agent of key change of the Asian educational systems in the second half of 20th century, and in the case of North America had been in the 19th and 20th centuries. Well, in Latin America, poverty and distributive inequality persist. This is making it difficult to establish more integrated societies. The inequality of educational opportunities is making that education is not being able to break the vicious cycle of poverty and social inequality. Well, this researcher, this is a Mexican researcher, found that there are two kinds of educational policies that are being applied in Latin America. The first encompasses a set of basic policies to improve quality and efficiency, which are very rigid and resist any fundamental change. The second covers a set of peripheral policies related to the expansion and growth enrollment. Well, there's a little bit of philosophy studies here. To understand the nature and scope of knowledge in higher and post-secondary education, the epistemological question, if you want, it's important to first review the institutional or the foundational nature of these educational levels. This review may involve the analysis of different trends with historical and spatial variations. Okay. Only for put an example of this, in the period of classic Greek philosophers, it is possible to find several intersecting tendencies. On one hand, for example, the sophists instructed free men who could participate in democratic structure to develop skills, mainly rhetoric, to persuade and arrive to power. On the other hand, there is the Socratic tendency, if you want. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, of knowledge and wisdom. Aristotle used to say, I'm friend of Plato, but I'm friend of the truth. In each of these tendencies, there are crossing and variations. Okay. Just propose an example. In the literature, even in America and Latin America, in the literature on educational issues, the reference to the history of evaluation in China used to select the best public officials is recurrent. Here, centuries ago, we found an example of meritocracy from which we can learn a lot today in Colombia and in countries of Latin America, where there are practices that affect what we now call a selection process. Okay. This Spanish author Diaz argues that this cannot be fair when the social structures is unfair. The Moreno de los Arcos clarifies that it's not ethical to probe who doesn't meet the requirements as a way of doing social justice. By the way, the fight for social justice must occur elsewhere, not in school. That's mean there's a lot of questions about how evaluation in educational systems involves political conflicts. But as we know, as teachers or people who roll with the educational system, it's not about social justice all the time when we do assessment. Well, it's very important to keep in mind the relationships between society, knowledge, and higher education. This comes from a British philosopher, Ronald Barnett. There are ontological aspects related with the nature of some educational process. There are political characters, religious or pragmatic orientations. Schumacher, for example, analyzed in 20th century how education for emancipation in rich countries and technological transfers in poor countries was promoted. This is a very interesting reflection about the nature that people and states used to give to educational process.